The Rebel Capitalist Show.
We were just talking kind of off camera about Tucson and the lockdowns and how this, what's happened in 2020 and 21 is going to potentially affect the real estate markets and the local economies. You know, what's interesting is back prior to this happening, that was always considered one of the safest bets in real estate. Remember that? Yes. Like college apartments or houses.
Housing, absolutely.
Yeah, that
guaranteed
economy completely done.
Yep.
So, and I know you've really got your finger on the pulse of real estate because of the investing that you do with Robert and Ken McElroy. So, number one, what are you guys seeing in the real estate landscape? And then number two, are you seeing any potential opportunities? Maybe you've got a watch list of some things that might get cheap because of the blood in the street, so to speak.
Yeah, it really, the whole landscape, all the rules have changed dramatically. And when you talk about the college towns, we were talking earlier, these college towns, all these small businesses that rely on the universities and the colleges, and they're out of business. It's just devastating what's happening. So what we're seeing, and I know what a lot of people are seeing, is there's this huge migration out and migration into certain areas, certain states. And this is all over the world. This is not just the US, this is all over the world.
Right.
And so I'll give you a quick example. We were selling my mom's house in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And this happened this was in July of 2019. So it's been, or 2020. So it was 6 months into the pandemic.
Okay.
And the market before this, her house was worth so much. Well, as soon as there was all this influx of people from the Northeast, from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Boston area, all coming to South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, the price of her house in just that 6 months went up at least by 1/3. Wow. We didn't even have it on the market. It wasn't even on the market. Our realtor was just talking to people, and we had a full price offer within 24 hours of deciding on a price. We pulled it off the market and rethought it again. And then she went out and talked to some of her friends and put a higher price tag on it. And again, 24 hours later, full price, no contingencies. People are looking to get out of these cities and out of these lockdowns. They're buying properties sight unseen.
Right.
Phoenix, where I live right now, is just booming. I've never seen it. So we're in high season. So high season, February, March, April, high season for all the snowbirds. Well, this is so much more traffic and so many more people than the typical high season, because we've got all the Californians moving in here, as well as other people. But the states that are opening, that are much more, have let go of the regulations, right, and are letting people be free, they're the ones they're seeing the opportunity.
So as a professional real estate investor, how do you look for opportunity? Because the debate that I have internally is, yes, prices are going up, but I always like to buy things when they're cheap and sell them when they're expensive. Mm-hmm. And I don't like to chase a market. And we know that prices are at all-time highs, even when you adjust for inflation. Right. So I always say, if we were in a bubble back in 2006, and the prices are even higher today, adjusted for inflation, then by definition, we have to be in a bubble today. So it's tough to go in there and buy a property, just hoping that the price goes up and kind of bet on the capital flow and the population flow. But it's tough to have your money in the bank just sitting there losing value to inflation. So how are you navigating that landscape?
Well, there's a couple things that we're doing, and there always are opportunities. But like in Phoenix, for example, I wouldn't go buy a personal residence right now. Their prices are just too high. There's always been the need for senior housing because baby boomers are getting older, so that hasn't changed. We're doing a deal right now with senior housing. But what I think is going to be the real opportunity, if somebody can crack this nut, is, as we know, the commercial market, office space, people have fled the office space. They're not coming back.
Right.
I don't think the office sector will ever be back the way it was. So if you can figure out how to repurpose all those office buildings and all of that office space and turn it into something. People are talking about turning it into affordable housing. I mean, we're going to need affordable housing in many areas, but if you can figure out how to repurpose the office space, that could be a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I know we were having dinner with Kenny the other night, and he was talking about malls.
Yes.
And a great example of that's just a PV mall right there. I mean, great area, but it's like a ghost town. It
was just there. I was
Oh,
surprised. Yeah, there's just nothing. Everything is shut down. Stores are closing. Big box stores are closing again. So if you can repurpose the shopping malls, I see a lot of them going to services, restaurants, salons, spas, things like that. That seems to be working as well.
Well,
one other opportunity I see is, since this pandemic, is that everybody wants everything delivered.
Yeah, right.
So if you can find warehousing space where companies will come and warehouse their goods and services, or their goods anyway, we've been looking at that as well. We've been looking in Georgia. We've been looking at the ports, like the Port of Georgia. And I think we're too late to that party already. And we thought we got there pretty early, and that was about almost a year ago. And we're almost too late then. But that's going to be another opportunity for warehousing, delivery services, things like that, where to store all those goods. So it's like Amazon just bought Whole Foods. Right. Well, did they buy Whole Foods for Whole Foods, or did they buy it because now they have a distribution system?
That's right.
All across the US.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I've gone back and tried to do a lot of research on the Spanish flu, just for personal freedom issues, because obviously nothing like what we've seen in 2020 or 2021 has happened in our lifetime. So we just assume that it's completely unprecedented. And I try to use critical thinking and the scientific process to the degree which you can, and try not to get emotional about it and say, okay, well, is this really unprecedented? Let's go back and see what happened in 1918 as far as mask mandates, as an example. And you see that there were just as draconian measures. The big difference back then, though, is they were never mandated by the state. They left it, or the federal government, they left it up to each individual mayor. So it was far more decentralized as far as the decision-making process. And then I thought through, okay, well, we went into the 1920s, but we didn't have a big shift in, let's say, consumer behavior. But you didn't have the internet. You didn't have Zoom back then. You didn't have Skype. So it's a fascinating question to try to figure out, if there would have been a Zoom back in 1920, would there have been a shift like there is today? The question is, I don't know, maybe, but it really tries to get you, it really promotes the thinking for what's going to happen in 2023, 2025, and 2030 and beyond, to try to figure out how things have changed for good and what the landscape is going to be to try to take advantage of that.
Yeah. That's a great point, because you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got YouTube, and we personally have been censored on all of those platforms because we spoke out against the COVID requirements, and we spoke out against masks, and we talked about the vaccines and things like that. And having that, I mean, how much has that played into this whole fear? People are scared to death. They look at individuals as weapons against them.
Right. Yeah, right.
So that's a great question. What if Facebook and YouTube, what if that wasn't here and people weren't getting swayed in their thinking or told only one point of view? They actually could think for themselves.
And it's interesting, back during that time frame, the media was doing the complete opposite. I was reading that the media was actually trying to convince people that it didn't exist.
Oh, interesting.
That it wasn't a big deal.
To not scare them?
Just because I don't know the rationale. They just, maybe that was the political message that I don't know how much pull the politicians had back then, but maybe they're like, hey, listen, we don't want this to be a big deal because this is going to crush the economy. So, hey, media, let's just tell people that it's not a big deal, or let's downplay this. Where instead today, obviously, a lot of people would say that they're overplaying it. that they're really taking it over the top and they're sensationalizing it and cherry picking specific data and whatnot. But it seems like they did the complete opposite back then. And but that's a very good point, because see, I was thinking about what if Zoom or Skype didn't exist or did exist back then. But you're talking about the echo chamber from a social standpoint of the Twitters, the Facebooks. And because people like things on Facebook that they are sympathetic to, then Facebook feeds them more and more and more of that content. Therefore, they get that echo chamber of only what they want to hear. And it's like going to a courtroom and only hearing the plaintiff or only hearing the defendant.
Yeah, that's a great point, because if you've ever been in a lawsuit or something like that, and you read the side against you, I'm like, wow, that sounds really good. Really bad people.
Right.
That's a great point. That is a great point.